Hello and welcome to my channel. Today is Wednesday and that means it's time for a missing and murdered segment. This is kind of a short one just because it is older and I do not have a whole lot of information on it, but that being said, we're going to jump right into it. James Joseph Reeb was an American Unitarian, a Universalist minister, pastor, and activist during the Civil Rights Movement in Washington, D.C. and Boston. And Boston, Massachusetts. While participating in the Selma to Montgomery marches, actions in Selma, Alabama. I don't know why that didn't... I misspelled Alabama. That's why it threw me off. I'm sorry. In 1965, he was murdered by white segregationists and white supremacists, dying of head injuries in the hospital 2 days after being severely beaten. 3 men were tried for Reeb's murder but were acquitted by an all-white jury. His murder remains officially unsolved. Reeb was born on January 1st, 1927 in Wichita, Kansas to May and Harry Reeb. He was born in Kansas and raised in Casper, Wyoming. He attended Natrona County High School and graduated in 1945, after which he joined the Army despite the fact that his commitment to the ministry made him exempt from service. After basic training, he was sent to Anchorage, Alaska as a clerk typist for the headquarters of Special Troops. He was honorably discharged 18 months later in December 1946 as Technical Sergeant, 3rd Class. After his time in the Army, Reeb continued his schooling, initially attended classes in his hometown at Casper Junior College before moving on to St. Olaf College. In 1947, where he received his A.B. cum laude in 1950. He then entered Princeton Theological Seminary in Princeton, New Jersey, where he earned his B.D. in 1953. 3 days later, Reeb was ordained a Presbyterian minister at the First Presbyterian Church of Casper. After this, he accepted a position at the Philadelphia General Hospital as chaplain to the hospitals for the Philadelphia Presbyterian. To become a more effective counselor, he returned to school, enrolling at Cornell School of Theology and earning an STM in pastoral counseling in 1955. As a scholar of theology, Reeb grew away from traditional Presbyterian teachings and was drawn to the Unitarian Universalist Church. In March 1957, he resigned his Presbyterian chaplaincy and contacted the American Unitarian Association about transferring his fellowship from Presbyterian to Unitarian. I do not know the difference. I was raised Catholic, so if anybody has the difference between these two things, I would love to know more about it. I didn't even think to research it, and that's on me. But I was raised Catholic. I don't know the difference. Reeb appreciated the church's emphasis on social action, and he became active in the civil rights movement during the 1960s. As a member of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Reeb went to Selma to join the Selma to Montgomery marches, a series of protests for African American voting rights that followed the murder of Jimmy Lee Jackson in Marion, Alabama by a law enforcement officer, not uncommon even today. Reeb was prompted by the bloody Sunday attack by state troopers and sheriff's deputies on nonviolent demonstrators on March 7, 1965. After eating dinner at an integrated restaurant on March 9th, Reeb and 2 other Unitarian ministers, the Reverend Clark Olson and the Reverend Orloff Miller, were attacked by white men with clubs for their support of African American rights. Sounds about right. The Black Hospital in Selma did not have the facilities to treat him. 2 hours elapsed and his condition deteriorated before Reeb arrived at a Birmingham hospital. Treatment was not available for him in much closer Montgomery, where doctors performed brain surgery. While Reeb was on his way to the hospital in Birmingham, civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. addressed a press conference lamenting the cowardly attack and asking all to pray for his protection. Reeb went into a coma and died 2 days later from his injuries. Reeb's death resulted in a national outcry against the activities of white racists in the Deep South. Tens of thousands held vigils in his honor. President Lyndon B. Johnson called Reeb's widow and father to express his condolences, and on March 15th invoked Reeb's memory when he delivered a draft of the Voting Rights Act to Congress. The same day, King eulogized Reeb at a ceremony at Brown's Chapel in Selma. James Reeb symbolizes the forces of goodwill in our nation. He demonstrated the conscience of the nation. He was an attorney for the defense of the innocent and the court of world opinion. He was a witness to the truth that men of different races and classes might live, eat, and work together as brothers. And King said, James Reeb says something to each of us, black and white alike. Says that we must substitute courage for caution. Says to us that we must be concerned, not merely about who murdered him, but about the system, the way of life. White supremacists in Alabama, however, reacted differently and tried to manipulate the public understanding of how Reeb died. Selma Sheriff Jim Clark falsely stated in an open letter he wrote and distributed that Reeb, whom he identified as the so-called minister, died after being, quote, thrown out of one beer joint, then coming out of another when he and his companion had a fight or were beaten by some men, end quote. Not how that happened. Selma business leaders circulated printed material that falsely claimed Reeb had suffered only a minor injury in Selma and was subsequently killed by civil rights workers who crushed his skull out on a dark road. The Voting Rights Act was passed on August 6th, 1965. And of course, it's always going to come back to the civil rights workers, you know, were the violent ones, when really they just wanted to be treated like people. In April 1965, 4 men, Elmer Cook, William Stanley Hugel, Naaman O'Deal Hoggy, that is the whitest name, whitest southern country boy name I've ever heard, and all of my family is from Kansas. Just saying. And R.B. Kelly were indicted in Dallas County, Alabama for Reeb's murder. 3 were acquitted after less than 90 minutes of deliberation by an all-white jury that December. The 4th man fled to Mississippi and was not returned by the state authorities for trial. Of course. In July 2007, the Boston Globe reported that the FBI's Cold Case Initiative had reopened the investigation into the 46-year-old case. The renewed investigation was also reported by the Anniston Star and the Clarion Ledger of Jackson, Mississippi. However, in 2011, the case was closed again and no charges were pursued. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, the decision to close the case was made upon discovery that 3 of the 4 men believed to be responsible for the killing were deceased and that Norman Hoggy, I cannot get over this name, Hoggy, the only surviving individual, was tried and acquitted of the crime in state court, barring him from further prosecution. Because, yeah, that's how that works. It's double jeopardy, and I get that, but still sucks, because somebody should have paid for this crime. Norman Hoggy, I'm going to laugh every time I say his name. I'm so sorry, and I know it's not funny, and it's not funny, but who names their kid Hoggy? Died 5 years later on August 31st, 2016 at the age of 81. In memory of James Reeb, in 2013, All Souls Church founded the Reeb Voting Rights Project, which continues to work for the expansion of voting rights and the prevention of disenfranchisement in the U.S. NPR investigative journalists Andrew Beck Grace and Chip Brantley presented the findings of a multi-year investigation in a podcast, White Lies, which aired in May and June of 2019. During their investigation, Grace and Brantley found an eyewitness, Francis Bowden, and a 5th man, William Portwood, who was involved in the crime. Portwood had not previously been identified. Grace and Brantley interviewed William Portwood in 2017. At that time, Portwood had suffered from strokes and was experiencing memory lapses. However, he was able to remember having been there. Quote, all I did was kick one of them. End quote. Okay. He had multiple strokes. Okay. And was experiencing memory lapses. But to say that he could definitively remember being there and did something, and this is not in defense of a white supremacist, this is not in defense of a racist, this is somebody whose mother has dementia. And it is very easy to convince them that they did something or were at something that they may not have actually been at. And because this man was not previously identified, there is no guarantee that he was actually there. They could have unintentionally planted that thought in his brain. So I have no opinion on William Portwood because I know that false confessions are a real thing and that people who have strokes, a lot of strokes, multiple strokes, do tend to show signs of like early onset dementia. And he was 80 years old. Like, so, you know, I'm just saying, I am not defending this guy because I don't know, but I am saying that there's no definitive proof, and I cannot say for sure that what he said he did, he actually did, and that wasn't just put into his head, if that makes sense. Grace and Francis Bowden is the proprietor of Selma Bail Bonds, which was located adjacent to the crime scene. After the death of Norman Hagel, Norman Hagee, I don't know where it's got Norman Hagel from, but and learning that William Portwood had admitted to being involved, Bowden gave an account of what she saw that night from the window of her business. In summary, she stated that Elmer Cook, William Stanley Hagee, Duck Hagee, and William Portwood assaulted Reverends Reeb, Olson, and Miller. It was Elmer Cook who swung the club and struck Reverend Reeb. William Portwood died shortly after his last interview with NPR on September 30th, 2017. And I understand that there's this eyewitness that says, oh, this is definitely what happened, but it's also been, 46 years, I think they said, since this case. And, again, things change. People remember things that didn't happen. People remember things that did happen, but too late. It's just how it is. So the rest of them suck. But as for William Portwood, I cannot definitively say that he for sure did something or didn't do something, because I wasn't there. And also because I know how medical conditions can affect the brain. That being said, please leave your comments down below. Any suggestions, anything you want to see, let me know. Any cases you'd like me to cover. If you have a missing family member and you would like me to talk about their case, please feel free to send me an email at christianariemann@gmail.com. That's ChristianaRiemann@gmail.com, and I will look into it. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.